Apple just turned 50 and we're diving deep into their contributions to filmmaking during this time. QuickTime, Firewire, ProRes, Final Cut Pro, and so much more. But before they became the most valuable company on earth, they nearly went bankrupt. Steve Jobs came back, killed 70% of their products, and saved the company. Right now, another company in our industry could use that exact same playbook.
If tomorrow Videndum is approaching us and offering us to become the CEOs, are we taking this position or
no?
not?
Videndum, the parent company behind Manfrotto, Sachtler, SmallHD and Teradek, has lost 99% of its stock value. No permanent CEO in 18 months. So what would it actually take? He said Apple wants to sell to everyone. And it is one of the worst mistakes that the company can make. You can never sell to everyone. So what they did, they killed all of those products, and this is what was left. Apple at 50, Videndum on the edge, and a Swiss startup putting digital sensors inside your analog camera. Episode 111, let's get going.
This is Focus Check, the weekly CineTech podcast.
Welcome to episode 111, right after the Easter break. How are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you very much. Had a great time with the family. How was your time at Easter?
Same, great weather, and now back to
reality.
The reality. This episode, I think we don't have so many news stories, but there were quite a few big stories in a way that I think are interesting for discussion. So let's get started and give a bit of an overview. So I want to talk about Apple's anniversary. Apple last week celebrated their 50th anniversary. I think they were born on April 1st, 1976. And I wrote a piece on kind of doing a deep dive on I think how Apple really reshaped filmmaking. And it's a bit of a personal story too, because it was really the iMac DV that got me started with editing and really kind of formed this professional interest in becoming a filmmaker in a way. So I just want to talk about and look back a little bit at like how everything shaped over the last 50 years with Apple in filmmaking. Then we'll dive into the I'm Back Roll APS-C sensor, a removable sensor for analog cameras, which is quite interesting and seems to be very popular actually.
Absolutely. I mean, this is something that we've been following for the last, how many years now?
Well, I'm Back, the company. Basically the idea was always to digitize old analog cameras. And I think...
But now I think they're getting it right. Now it's finally becoming really interesting also for us personally when now they managed to recruit a bigger sensor.
It was at least 10 years when they came up to us at Photokina in Cologne, a show that doesn't exist anymore. Right. And I mean, they've done a lot of different ways now of trying to get this right. But yeah, we'll talk about this new one. We'll also talk about Videndum, the mother company of a lot of especially accessory brands in our industry. I did a deep dive on their annual results actually, and what it means for the future of the brands under their wing and what it might mean. You wrote a piece on why camera batteries fail, based on a video that Core SWX CEO Ross Kanarek did, where he really explained watt hours, voltage, and amps, which is very interesting actually for non-electricians, just to understand the relation and what actually makes and breaks a battery over time, right? We'll also mention that CVP, our European sponsor, is now our European retail sponsor, next to B&H in the US, is now expanding into Germany, Austria, and Switzerland with a dedicated local team, which is great because we're headquartered in Austria. And I think it's been time that they finally have somebody who speaks German and really goes into the market.
Becoming even more European.
Exactly. And last but not least, we'll also talk about the AutoCut plugin, which now directly integrates into Premiere Pro. And actually, the last thing we'll mention is a new lesson added to our ethical generative AI course on MZed. But shall we get started with I'm Back, actually?
Yeah, I think it's a very nice topic to start with. And there are two crazy guys. Actually, Emmanuel is the main crazy guy, and then he has Samuel is the main crazy guy, and Samuel has a business partner. and both are in this business of trying to revive old analog cameras and make them digital. And we've been following this story, as you said, for about 10 years. And they started with something which was a bit, I would say it was not 100% product yet, like the way to integrate the sensor, a digital sensor into an analog camera. It was with wires, and it was with external batteries, and the whole thing was quite big. But now, finally, they're able to move on and have an APS-C Sony sensor that actually, it's the same one that I think Fujifilm is even using, and probably other cameras too. And there are no wires, there are no external batteries. This literally, you open your analog camera, put the whole device in, close it, and you're able to take photos and videos, even up to 4K videos. And I have to say that for me personally, now it's getting interesting to really try this type of method, because I really wonder, although the sensor, the Sony sensor itself is kind of off the shelf, and I guess they didn't have too much money to invest and adjust the sensor to actual needs. But I really wonder if you put this sensor the way they want us to put at the back and use analog cameras, if the look and feel are a bit different. This is something that we should really try, and we are in direct contact with Samuel. Hopefully we're able to get a camera soon. What is your take on this innovation?
Well, I just want to mention for people who are not seeing the video version of this, that this is, like you said, I mean, it's being placed where usually the film roll goes. You know, like that's why it's called roll. It's literally a sensor on where usually the film is being exposed, connected to the roll, which I think probably contains the battery, I'm not sure, for the thing to power the sensor. And I mean, we're playing the video here just to show how they're actually making this. It's a very smart invention, I think. I'm actually surprised when you see that nobody else has done this before. Of course, the problem with this whole thing in general is that there are so many different models of analog cameras that, you know, this will not fit into every camera. So, I mean, they have I think they have a compatibility list and so on. And I think that was always a bit of their problem. I just know from the past that we saw from user feedback that a lot of people actually with the early versions had really problems with compatibility and getting it to work. I think they learned a lot. Little caveat here, of course, this is still a Kickstarter campaign, right? So,
but that's also interesting because it's a Kickstarter campaign, you can see the interest of people in something like this.
Yeah.
And this is turning to be a very successful campaign. They have already almost 750 people who backed this project. They raised 362,000 euros. So obviously people really are, I don't know if that's the nostalgic part of it, or people are really want to see what they can do with their cameras.
Well, it fits perfectly. I think it's also the perfect time, because we've talked a lot about those niche cameras lately that have become very popular, you know, the Fujifilm ones, and then also cameras that kind of deliver a unique look, like, for example, the what is it called, the one from Fujifilm that shoots these very short video clips now.
The Instax Cinema.
Yeah, exactly. So it's just an example for these kind of things. So I think it's perfectly in kind of culturally in the perfect time now to catch on. And I think people love vintage cameras, and if they can give it a second life, because it's become very difficult to actually source film, but especially develop film, is becoming more difficult. So, you know, like you have an analog camera, but you don't have to make all the steps back, which means like going through the whole process. You can kind of combine the best of the digital world, which is the instantaneous image and video, with the analog camera. The cool thing is, of course, I mean, cool not cool, but the cool thing is you don't see your image immediately. It's literally like an analog camera. So you take a photo or a video, and it's a surprise. You don't have to develop it per se, but you will not see, because there's no screen on the camera, of course. So you kind of take a photo, and then you have to expose properly, and you can only see it once you connect these to a computer and transfer the footage or photo. So that's, I think, is the cool thing here.
Just a little bit about the sensor, because this is a BSI, a back illuminated CMOS sensor, APS-C, as we mentioned. Actually, I wish we could do some dynamic range test for this one, but it will be quite...
well, we've tested the IMX571, I'm sure, in several other cameras, so it's probably the same.
Yeah, but usually when companies like Fujifilm or others are doing it, of course, they have their own technology baked into the sensor, so it's not that they are using off-the-shelf sensor here. But if you go to the Kickstarter campaign page, you can see a lot of photos that were done with this specific new roll. It looks quite convincing, I have to say, and I'm
well,
really
the cool thing is
forward.
also it's contained in the body now, so that means nothing is dangling out, like you said at the beginning, in terms of cables, which also means you can theoretically put this into waterproof cameras, so you can do underwater photos. I mean, it has a one underwater photo on the featured image here of the Kickstarter campaign. It's quite exciting, actually.
Okay, and I guess the question will be, analog cameras don't have, of course, a memory slot. So how do you do the recording? So just in case that you guys are interested, there is a kind of a SSD chip or memory chip built into the board.
It's a fixed memory?
That's right. So at least the one that I see here is a 256 gigabyte. And that's what allows the person to record photos or videos.
Okay. How do you transfer stuff? I think Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, right?
That's right. So basically everything is built into the electronic board.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's it. I mean, you have the battery, you have the Wi-Fi.
Battery is built in, so you need to charge it via USB-C, which is actually quite easy to do as well. I guess no way to replace the battery then.
Which is interesting, because I really wonder how it's going to be in the future, because from 2027, at least in the EU market, you will have to have you'll have to be able to replace batteries.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, let's see how smartphone manufacturers will react to that. I was surprised to hear that. And as you said, it's already quite successful. I mean, Kickstarter early bird pricing starts at $500, then it goes to $600, and if you want two of them, it's $1,000. There have been some mixed reports, to be honest, from people who were part of the earlier campaigns that have commented that I'm Back was not reliable in the past. I just want to mention that because we have no experience with them. We didn't order or anything like that in that regard. But I just want to mention that, again, this is a Kickstarter campaign. You theoretically, as with any Kickstarter campaign, you don't have a guarantee that the product will actually find the way to you. I think they've shipped quite a few in the past, so I would be quite confident that it comes. Whether it's compatible with your camera, you really have to check beforehand. I think I would definitely do my homework before I order something, just to be sure that it's actually working with the analog camera I want to use it with. And of course, the value question here is for more than $700, you can buy if you're if you're not into if it's about getting a camera that shoots nice photos or videos, you probably should look into buying a used X-T3 or X-T4 for around $700, and the vintage lens adapter, because the value proposition of the I'm Back roll is really more about the experience and the emotion. You want to shoot with the original camera body and not just use the lens, basically. That's legitimate, but it's not really a specs rational purchase, right? So if you want a pure digital camera, you can probably get a better one for the same amount of money used on the used market. But I think it's more about the experience here. So
absolutely,
they've been around for 10 years now. Their first that we reported about, actually, the first attempted a digital film insert around 2016. It was bulky, it was external, it was a tiny 1/2.33 inch 16 megapixel sensor. It got attention, but it was clearly a prototype. And then over time they evolved. I think in 2020 they released a Micro Four Thirds version. This is the first one that does APS-C. So of course, smaller crop, 1.5 times crop. and it's a shit product, so I wouldn't worry about that. The community reception was a little bit, there was skeptical people, of course, but there were some really believers. I found some reports of people that commented on online reports that really said that this has like an I'm back film owner. He said it became his core gear and it reignited their love of shooting with Leica R SLRs and Voigtlander Bessa rangefinders. So, it's that's the story here. You have to try for yourself, I think. I mean, of course, the safest way would be to get this in retail where you have a chance to actually send it back if you don't like it. That's not the case. It's still a Kickstarter, so there is a risk involved. If you are interested, I mean, we're going to try to review it and then you can form your opinion based on what we find. I think it's definitely worth shooting a little story with this thing if we get our hands on it.
That will be interesting, yeah. Also worth mentioning that it's a Swiss company, I think, just for you to know. And as we said, the two people behind it is Samuel and Filippo, basically. And
the interesting thing for me here, this is a new category. It's neither film nor digital. It's kind of in between, right? Because it's really a camera you're using a camera that was not built for film. And it is in between because you don't see the results immediately, but you still shoot digitally. So that's quite cool, actually. You kind of, it's still a black box until you move your image over Wi-Fi or whatever, or Bluetooth to your phone or desktop. So it is, you can't really take a photo and, even if the delay is just 10 minutes, there's still a delay. The moment will be gone, right? It's like, you know what I mean? It's like you can't...
delay? What do you mean delay?
Well, the delay between taking a photo or a video and not being able to see it immediately. So there is still... you don't have to ship it to somewhere to get it developed, but you still have this... The moment will be gone. You take a photo of somebody, you cannot check it immediately. You will not kind of, take the thing out and connect it to your digital devices in order to see what you've just done. You lose the moment. So that's why I'm saying it's in between. It's also in terms of the experience. You have an analog camera with a digital sensor inside, but you don't have the benefit of typical digital cameras of seeing what you just produced immediately. And of course, I mean, the look is mostly down to what lens you used. You could have that same experience probably with a digital camera, but you need to know what you're doing in terms of like exposure and so on if it's a manual camera, and I think a lot of people these days probably don't know anymore. So
yeah, I just wish that maybe there was, because there is a USB-C connector also to charge the battery. I really hope that there was a way to literally use this USB-C for other stuff, for example, connecting a small monitor or EVF.
But it's not going out of the thing. You cannot. How the USB-C connector? It's inside the camera on the roll. It's not free. You can only connect it for charging. So you would have to kind of modify your camera, and that's not possible.
Maybe there's a way. I don't know. I mean, like to think how to.
Yeah, but then you lose the advantage again. I mean, you lose this mixture digital analog again, right? Because then it becomes like a normal digital camera. You mean like putting the next step could be for them to design a small monitor that goes on the back of an analog camera. But then it's like it kind of defeats the purpose in a way.
Maybe
it's I mean. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if the results will look any different than using a digital camera with the same sensor and the same lens. That's going to be interesting to see actually, but probably not. But yeah, okay. So let's see. We'll definitely try to get our hands on one and shoot some 4K video with it. This is, by the way, motion JPEG, I think. So of course, kind of a dated. Format, not very high quality in terms of video recording, but we'll definitely try to check it out and see how it goes. I mean, we have a lot of old analog cameras here behind us and also elsewhere. We're also gonna try, when we get our hands on it, to work with different digital analog cameras to use this. Yeah, in terms of compatibility, the Kickstarter says that it works with a wide range of 35mm film cameras from major brands like Nikon, Canon, Minolta, Contax, Yashica, Contax, Pentax, Olympus, Leica, and more. Popular models include the Nikon F, F2, F3, F4, and many others. I think I have an F3 somewhere lying around here. So, yeah, going to be interesting. We know that there have been compatibility issues with predecessors before. But yeah, let's dive in once we get our hands on it. Let's see. When is the delivery time
2027.
frame? Oh, wow. Okay, that's August 2027. We'll try to get our hands on earlier.
Before
that. So they definitely have to fund the production with the Kickstarter here. Okay, interesting.
Quick sponsor break. The lighting in our Focus Check podcast studio is supplied by Nanlite. That glow you see behind us, those rich purples washing through our vintage camera collection. That's their PavoTube 2 6XR tubes, magnetically attached to the shelves. 8 of them, and they all charge simultaneously in one rugged case. Pull them out, they turn on and sync automatically. Our key lights are Nanlite FC500Bs. 520 watts of beautifully accurate soft lighting through rapid 90 parabolic softboxes that literally deploy in 5 seconds. I'm not exaggerating. One motion, they're open. One trigger pull, they collapse flat. The PavoTube 30Cs on the floor handle our edge light and that curtain separation in the back, with barn doors keeping everything precisely controlled. And every single fixture in this room we control from one app on an iPad, the NanLink app. For a weekly show that's not a luxury, it's a necessity. Check out Nanlite's full range of LED lighting on nanlite.com. And now back to the show.
Shall we move on to the Videndum article?
Sure.
So basically, I mean, we've been following this story for a little bit because, I mean, Videndum, as many don't actually still know, is the parent company behind a lot of very well-known industry brands from the filmmaking industry, especially high-end. They are the owner of Teradek, SmallHD, Manfrotto, Sachtler, Quasar Science, Anton Bauer, Light Panels, Wooden Camera, Vinton, Gizzo, many, many others. If you've ever been on a professional film set, you've probably touched their products. Now, you wrote a piece about they're a public company. They're on the stock exchange, so their financial bearings are public for everybody to see. Now, ironically, as a gear-related website, we and many others usually don't look so much at those things, but we have to look at them more because we know that the market in general is under pressure, and it was just worth looking at from a standpoint of, will this company actually survive?
Yeah, I mean, it started to be interesting for us in general because of the competition with Chinese companies. So we really wanted to see how companies on the Western world are actually reacting to a much faster market. And then we started to look at stuff a bit closely. And we saw that the company actually, it was, I think, more over a year ago, they were literally let down all the management. Everybody that we knew, almost everybody that we knew on the higher management had to leave. A lot of the management, like a bit lower, those people who took care of, let's say, everyday tasks and making, future plans on the marketing and so on, everybody's gone. And that's where we started to be, it started to be more interesting for us because the people that we were in contact were simply disappeared. And then we saw that the people that took over are those who are actually dealing with the money. And
let's dive a little bit deeper on each one of those things. I mean, the company basically nearly went bankrupt. That's the most recent news, and that's something that a lot of people actually missed, which is significant. Like, just imagine all those brands disappearing. That would be really, really hard on the industry. Also, with a huge installed user base of those products, of course. They literally just completed a £85 million emergency refinancing literally the day before publishing these results on March 30th. Their revenue has halved in 3 years. So their best year was 2022, I think, with 442 billion pounds. Now it's down to 228 million. And the auditors, so, they publish those long financial reports, which, we're not financial people, but basically they flagged a going concern warning, which is accountant speak for this company might not survive. What really happened, and that's the short version, is that Videndum really spent way over a decade buying up every brand in the filmmaking ecosystem. I mean, they literally bought one after another. We also know a lot of the people behind the brands who invented the brands from all those years at trade shows. And most of that acquisition spree was really funded by debt. Teradek, SmallHD, Quasar Science, Joby, Audix were all acquisitions. It worked really well during the streaming boom. Record revenue, as I said, in 22. And then three things hit at once. The 2023 Hollywood strike really killed demand overnight for a lot of companies in the industry, of course. Retailers stopped ordering and interest rates spiked on all the acquisition debt. And then the Investors Chronicle called it the 2023 Writers Guild strike really cast a long shadow, which is still visible 3 years later, where it's still not as much production happening. We've reported about this, the crisis of Hollywood as well. But basically, they tried to get a 120 million pounds equity raise in 2023 as an emergency, and it wasn't enough.
And also the corona, I think you did not mention
COVID.
the corona.
Well, the
COVID also killed it a little bit, because obviously when people people stop traveling, they don't need bags. For example, so you just buy much less. So it was all.
But immediately, during COVID, there was a streaming boom, of course. But there was after that, it like what was produced more then, it just kind of created afterwards because of that. And yes, like you said, there's not as much need for gear anymore afterwards, because I think they just purchased a lot of stuff, and then there was no need anymore. So basically, the revenue, the numbers are worth mentioning because of that, because they're still they just have a lot of debt. The crazy thing is that the company, the refinancing basically means that there is a 87% discount on the share price. The stock dropped 60% on the day of the equity raise on March 30th. If you look at the stock price now, it's actually incredible. They've lost stock value over almost 99.84. So almost, the whole company over the past 5 years lost over 99.8% of their value. It's a penny stock now, which is scary. And the market capitalization is tiny for a company that still makes over 200 million pounds in revenue. That is because of all the debt they have. So the good signs here, and that's switching to the positive thing. The Creative Solutions division, which is the one that owns Teradek and SmallHD, is the only division to actually grow their earnings year over year, even though their revenue fell. The premium cinema strategy that they're working is still is still working, and I think that's because Teradek still has a moat, because they are still the only one in the market with a zero latency wireless transmitter.
So just to complete what you just said, they had Amimon, and from that company they purchased the technology, but they sold it. They left the technology, like the patent stayed with them, but they lost. But they obviously, sorry to say, got rid of this company. The same with Joby.
But they kept the thing. They're still the only ones who can do the zero latency thing, which is the important thing.
In order to get some cash, they started to sell some companies. Amimon was one, and Joby. Yeah, we can talk about Joby later. But so you said Teradek is still somehow producing money for them.
Teradek and SmallHD are the only ones that are still growing, and they still had 22 new product launches in 25, which is more than 24 and 23. So there is still development happening. We also reported on the Manfrotto 1 tripod. I think I did an interview at the Build Expo in New York last year that also won a design award and so on. And it's actually, that's a really cool, innovative product. I mean, the Manfrotto 1 is really good. I was surprised to see this actually at this point in time, that is still possible from such a traditional tripod brand to see quite a bit of innovation. And I think that is the best design of tripod legs that I've seen since the Flowtech from Sachtler and Winton, which is also one of their brands, which was of course released during those high times a couple of years earlier. They're also doing quite well with Quasar Science because they are very well positioned for virtual production. Also, some years ago, for example, did an interview with Tim Kang, who at that time was still with Quasar. He's now with Aperture, because they were quite innovative with those lights that are connected to the background. So if you have a virtual production thing, like a screen in the background, and basically the lights can mimic what's happening on the back of the screen and just reflect that, and it looks very, very convincing if you have those lights, the RGB lights, kind of mimic the light effects from the background. And they're doing quite well with this. This is still growing quite a bit as well. And also, I mean, I think SmallHD is doing okay, although they have more competition now, also from Chinese brands with very affordable monitors. Yeah, so let's see. I mean, honestly, we're concerned that, the auditors, their own auditors, have said that they are literally hanging by a thread. And there's, of course, for the stock, there's not a buy recommendation, it's a hold. And they haven't had a permanent CEO for the last 18 months. So this tells you something about how hard it even is to recruit in this situation, because, who wants to touch? It's just very tough to find somebody who wants to stay around.
When you're talking, and for those who can't see, I'm really moving uncomfortably on the chair here because there's so much to say here. And you touched the Manfrotto 1 tripod. We've seen it. It's like we're watching the B&H deals every day to see if there's anything for the benefit of our audience and report about it. And then we started to see more and more Videndum products on daily basis, meaning the company literally need to generate money. Yeah. That's why they are heavily reducing the prices of bags from Lopro, for example, or their own bags, or tripods and the Teradek and SmallHD and all of that. Yeah, that's crazy how much good stuff that was before quite expensive, now you can find in discount prices. That's one thing. But I think the essence and the core thing is about innovation and turnover of like how fast the company can realize from an idea into bringing a product to the market. And I think that's where the mother company, like the philosophy here, at least up until now, was maybe not 100% like we would have loved them to see, because there are good people there, yeah, and there are some. But
we know a lot of those people for a very long time, and I think most of the people we knew are not there anymore, unfortunately. Also because you mentioned management, but it's a lot of the people who are really innovators who invented the product
all gone,
are not there anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
And also the engineering resources in the US explicitly were cut. And I think at some point the cost cutting will just simply hit the product, unfortunately. I mean, they have it on their balance sheet or on their annual results, the R&D spending fell, but it didn't fall as much. I mean, it went down from 19 million pounds to 15 million, so they're still spending quite a bit of money on that. Let's hope that that will actually still result in more good new products, because they will desperately need it. I just always personally thought that it's so strange to own this. I mean, 10 years ago or 5 years ago, even, it still seemed to make sense for them to own a lot of companies in the same industry. For example, tripods. I mean, they basically own 10 different, close to 10 different tripods companies. So basically the users, and I saw this as a feedback to that article from some people on social media, they didn't even realize that it's all the same company. But from, of course, it makes sense if you own all of them, I think that was the original thought. No matter what people buy, they always buy from you, but you can never own all of those companies. And like, because then now there's a lot of very innovative companies also from China and Japan in the tripod field, for example. And it's just weird. Like, why don't you at least combine some of the best ideas and consolidate under one brand? Why do you need 5 or 10 different brands in the same industry? I never understood the philosophy here.
If this is executed well, I don't think there is an issue.
Do you have an example from another industry? Because I don't know a single one. Like every time I see this in the long term.
I can give it from car industry and so on. But the thing is different here. People are used to buy from a certain brand, and if they love the brand, they will continue to buy.
True.
Yeah. So for example, if I believe in Zachler, I can buy from Zachler for years, regardless who is the mother company here. Same with Vinton and the same with Manfrotto. That's okay as long as the tripods, for example, are positioned well for a targeted audience. I think it's justified. This is fine. The issue is not that thing. The thing is if the borders are blurred, and then one company within the mother company is trying to cannibalize their own other brand, that's where it's becoming problematic. That's one thing. And the second thing is that I think they made a lot of really bad decisions when they were purchasing companies, because we know they tried to acquired like a gaming company. There was something like this.
Yeah, and then I think one of the last purchases was Audix, I think, which was very late in the game, and a lot of people are saying like, why? What does it even add to their portfolio?
That's right. Yeah. And on the other hand, they really killed. I mean, SERP, for example, very nice people behind.
And we love the products. I mean, those were the best sliders I've ever used. SERP Pro, and then they just rebranded it to Manfrotto.
Yeah, but they repositioned the company to do some stuff in New Zealand for the marketing, but then they also closed it and killed the company. So I think there were a lot of decisions, and it's not that of course, the managers must have an overall picture of what they do, but it looked as if the decisions that were taken over time were completely wrong.
Well, I think, that's what's frustrating about this? A lot of the companies that they acquired were really founded by passionate filmmakers and who also were engineers who really saw a gap in the market and made something. And it doesn't matter whether it's SmallHD, Teradek, SERP, many others, they found this gap. Or Rycode, for example. Rycode, such an amazing company. Those windshields are just one of a kind.
Industry standard.
And they were absolutely great companies. And then who took over were financial people who had no clue about the products. I think that is, for me, the biggest issue, because the top management had zero clue about what those things actually did. That's my personal opinion here. And then they cut all those people, and it just didn't make any sense. And also, now what's happening is, first of all, in that report, they said that the £350 million revenue target for this year requires a 53% organic growth without any acquisitions. That is extremely ambitious. How are you going to grow 53% in this market? That's tough. And also, in terms of competition, I think we didn't even talk about this yet. While they have been fighting for survival, in all those years, we had companies like Axoon, Holyland, SmallRig, DJI, aggressively taking market share from their low and mid tiers. And now they've really decided, and you can see this in the strategy from the companies they've sold, like Joby and so on, and also how they are readdressing it. They are really focusing on the high-end and premium cinema market. This is exactly the market that's suffering the most right now. Yeah. So strategically, it might make sense because, of course, they can't do all of it. And I think it might be much harder for them to compete on the low and mid tiers. But it also means that it's a really shrinking addressable market, which is like literally shrinking as we speak. And I don't know if the premium tier will actually hold, or does the gap between good enough, cheap Chinese gear and the gold standard Videndum gear keep narrowing? Because we also know that they shifted a lot of the productions to, we had some people comment actually from Costa Rica, where the Sachtler, for example, tripods and many other things are actually produced. And somebody is like, I'm from Costa Rica. They're producing their stuff here, but I can't afford it. I buy the stuff from China because it's actually the quality is great now. And, that's the irony. They still have the sticker brands, but they don't always. I mean, Manfrotto, I think, still produces in Italy and
Of
so
course,
on. But still, I mean, I think it's weird for them to focus on the high end at this point in time, even though strategically it might make sense.
It's a story to follow. We company is a company, but of course there are always people behind the company, and I think that's where we should. I really hope that not even more people will lose their jobs. But the way it looks now, it's a very, very tough and ambitious task to save the company.
I think they just have to. I mean, I would just concentrate it on way less brands. I think they should consolidate all those tripod brands maybe into 2, and just get rid of all the other names. Even though it means that I'm a lawyer, Sachtler or Videndum or whatever user. It just doesn't make sense to all keep this all up and just focus on the core. You know what? Because that also leads in the next story. Apple. Apple almost went bankrupt in the 90s. I was an Apple user in my teens already because my parents had a graphic design agency, and I was always the weird kid with the Apple computer that nobody else had because of that. And that was before Steve Jobs came back. The first thing he did when he took over the company is he literally cut 90% or so of the portfolio. They cut out the laser printers. They cut out the scanners. Apple had a digital camera. Apple had so many products. There were so many computers. Nobody knew what they all would like. They didn't understand their own lineup. I mean, it's literally they didn't understand why do we have all those. He cut them all and he killed all of them. He just focused on. He had there was a small square, and there was entry level, premium. For both computers, and then later, of course, iPod and so on. And that's it. And that's what saved them. And that what turned them. I think that's what Videndum needs to do now, because they just have way too many brands and products in order to survive.
A question for both of us. If tomorrow Videndum is approaching us and offering us to become the CEOs, are we taking this position or
no?
Not? Wow, you're very quick.
No, why? Why should I? I have a life.
No, we're kind of giving them advices. So why?
I'm not I don't pretend to have enough business knowledge to run such a big company. But I think in terms of complexity, it's just they need to simplify. They need to simplify and they have great products, and these I'm sure have still some great people, but they need to simplify their product lineup. It's just I think they don't even know themselves how many actual products they have. If you count all the brands and all the products, it's insane. And to maintain this and to be able to ship all of that is difficult. I mean, also, they don't have any recurring revenue, right? They have, if you buy a Sachtler tripod, it's very good quality. It should stick with you for at least 10 years. You're not, or a Manfrotto, you don't need to replace it. So they don't have any software, and I mean, except for some small stuff, of course, like Teradek, wireless stuff and so on. But there doesn't seem to be any real business decision to work on recurring revenue.
The thing is that it looks like many times they are jumping on current trends. For example, now they have a Vinton AI tripod.
What makes it AI?
Probably there's a certain mechanism to follow people or whatever. I didn't read enough to tell. I'm just saying that we saw this before with Joby and smartphone photography and filmmaking and so on. I would be happy not to become the CEO, but I would be happy to consult the next CEO and give from advice from the ground, because it's not that you have to be smart. You can be experienced and know the market, and actually I'm happy if they call us. I mean, I don't want to.
I would be too radical. I would kill 90% of the product.
But that's part of the thing. It's about structuring. It's about pricing. It's about marketing. There's so many things that can be done that I'm just surprised that they are not doing it. Maybe the company is just too big.
in German, there's a saying that it's 5 minutes before 12. For them, it's 5 minutes past 12. So it's very difficult, I think, to they have to make very radical decisions in order to survive in this, I think. And we can't all, I mean, for a long time, they pretended that they have products that are better quality than Chinese products, but it's simply not the case anymore. I mean, the level of manufacturing in China has reached a quality which is very hard to even touch for a lot of them. So that is over. So what they have is the brand name. They still have the brand names.
Right. But maybe the next CEO should just think Chinese.
I don't know. Yeah. So, and the recurring revenue thing, I mean, like they are trying to get some recurring revenue, quote unquote, by charging for updates for your SmallHD monitors to do camera control. That's also tough. Now you have a lot of like Xun and so on that offer this for free, right? You get updates
it's a niche
for
thing
free.
Anyway, this is
it is, and it's not, because it of course adds longevity to your product in a way, but it's you can't make this into like a subscription. People would get really upset. But even charging for individual updates is now difficult. So
anyway, if you have some experience with some of the Manfrotto products, or you have anything to contribute to the to this conversation, because again, it's not only about brands, it's also about people. If you know anybody who used to work there, anybody that had to leave because of the situation, or we're really interested to know what you think, because it's a pity. It's a huge company it's a small company in the sense of if you look how much money they make right now, but they have so many brands from that we love, and it will be a pity to see them go.
Yeah. I just want to show you something, because I mentioned it before, this matrix here. 1997, this is what Steve Jobs showed in his first keynote. He literally killed most of the products. He said, Apple wants to sell to everyone. And he said it is one of the worst mistakes that the company can make. You can never sell to everyone. So what they did, they killed all of those products, and this is what was left. Consumer and pro, desktop and portable computers. That's it. And if you remember, the first iMac that came out killed so many ports. I mean, this computer had not even a way, the first one didn't even have a way, didn't have a floppy drive anymore, and there was no built-in way to get information into the computer. I mean, we're talking about Internet Stone Age, 1997. So it had a CD player. The first one didn't even burn CDs. And it had a USB port. It was the first computer with a USB port, USB-A, of course. It did not have the SCSI port anymore, which was required to connect professional devices at the time. And it still became a huge hit because it was an emotional device, right? So it looked completely different from all those beige boxes at the time. And then you still had the professional. The first one was actually still a beige box, which was, before what Jobs changed, and the laptop as well. And then they only introduced a consumer portable after that. But I mean, you have to be radical at some point. And I hope that Videndum can be radical enough to survive. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good. Let's move on to actually Apple.
So Nino, you have some personal story that somehow connecting you to the 50th anniversary of the company.
Well, I just, I started a lot of reading actually, because Apple has started to publish a lot of content around its 50th anniversary. And they were opening, there's some reports online of opening their archives showing some prototypes of products that were never out in the public, like what the PCB board of the first Apple Watch and the first iPod. And it's very interesting, actually. And it got me thinking a little bit about my own history and career and, and how it's connected actually to Apple with the filmmaking industry. So I did a little bit of a deep dive and wrote about it on how Apple actually reshaped filmmaking over those 50 years. They just turned 50 on April 1st, and I think, love it or hate them, I think there is not a single tech company that has touched more parts of the filmmaking pipeline, like all the different things, whether it's capture, editing, grading, codecs, especially display and distribution. And it's worth stepping back and looking at this full arc. So basically, Apple, of course, didn't start in video. I mean, that's where I come from. Like, my parents used to have a graphic design agency, so they really Apple started in desktop publishing, and that's why I was born in 82, and as a kid, I was already drawing stuff on the Mac when all my friends were on the Windows computers that didn't, or actually DOS computers, and then Windows 3.1 or 3.11 and later 95, and it, like, you couldn't do anything. I remember going to school and opening those Windows computers and feeling like I'm in the Stone Age, compared to what I had in my parents' office using Macromedia freehand to draw stuff. It was completely night and day. I mean, it literally felt like 10 years at least in between those things, right? So that was really. Photoshop was Mac only, Illustrator was Mac only, PageMaker, which later became also InDesign and so on, when Adobe acquired Macromedia, they were all Mac only, and that's where originally this trust of creative people for Apple comes from, because in the 80s and also 90s, there was only Apple. You had to have an Apple computer. It was extremely expensive, but you had to be in this if you wanted to use a computer for desktop publishing and later video. And then I think what a lot of people underappreciate is the introduction of QuickTime in 1991, which completely underappreciated, because the .mov container format became the foundation of MPEG-4 and the ISO base media file format. So every MP4 file on Earth descends from QuickTime's architecture. And still, Apple, I think to this day, holds the registration authority for MP4 code points. The original, you know what the resolution was of the first QuickTime file?
Probably 360 something.
320 by 240 at 10 frames per second. That was the first one. What changed everything for me was also, actually, when I did the research, was what changed a lot in the video industry. So I had the original iMac, the iMac. I think it was just called iMac. There was the
colorful one,
the Bondi blue one, and then I upgraded in 99 or 2000 to the iMac DV, and it was called DV for digital video because that was the first computer in general, I think, that had FireWire, and FireWire changed everything, because FireWire meant you had a high-speed port at the time, which allowed you to connect a digital camera, a mini DV camera, in that case, that my dad bought me because he realized, oh, this guy is interested in video. Let's, give him a camera, which was great. So you had this small mini DV camera.
Video, audio, and control all in one.
Exactly. Everything, just one cable, connect the camera with this cable, and you can feed, and this was still on tape, of course, mini DV, and you could feed literally a digital copy of what was on that tape into your editing system. I started with iMovie and then quickly moved on to the first version of Final Cut Pro. And then the cool thing is you could round trip it. So basically storage was too expensive to keep it on a hard disk for quite a while. So what you did the editing, and when you were done editing, you took a new mini DV, but you could do effects, you could do titles, all that stuff. At that time, before that iMac DV, which was, according to my research, $1,300. Before that, getting into video editing meant spending $15,000 to $100,000 just to do editing, because everybody was on Avid. There was no Premiere yet.
There was. I mean, I bought before. It was a card from a company called Matrox. I think they still exist today.
There, yeah.
And I had a card by the name RT X2000 or 2000X, something like this, and that came with a Premiere version 4.0, and that's how I started. But
that was in 99 already?
That was, I can check, I don't remember the time. I can tell you that
a lot happened around that time, for sure. Yeah.
That was probably even before, and that's how I started to edit, basically. So
yeah, but it changed a lot. I mean, it basically, I just dabbled around in iMovie, and I already filmed stuff with my friends, and then suddenly I realized I can just edit it and do stuff with it and really like before that, the problem always was if you ran through VHS, the quality was degrading so massively that you kind of lost interest, right? It looked horrible. And with mini DV, of course, it was just SD long before HD resolutions, but it's still, you could maintain that quality. You would start with something and the end product would not look worse than before because you could just round trip it onto a mini DV.
Which was unbelievable at that time. I remember literally checking, how can it be that the quality is not deteriorating?
Yeah.
It was so amazing for that time. Yeah, that's actually a good. We can really run an episode once about like the historical things, like our experience with DV and whatever, because I'm sure that some of our audience also have stories to tell about how they started and what DV made.
You know the funny story about Final Cut Pro? Because Apple acquired that code from somebody else, right? So Key Grip origin story. So Randy Ubilius built the person, he built Final Cut Pro at Macromedia. A licensing dispute kind of killed it. And then Steve Jobs bought the source code in 98 after Adobe refused him a Premiere bundle deal. Adobe refused Apple, of course, Apple being in a very bad shape at that time, a bundle deal. So in typical Steve Jobs fashion, he just took over a competitor and made it better, and because Adobe thought Apple was dying. So Final Cut 1.0 was debuted, and I remember that, for $999 at NAB 1999. That was still quite a few years before we started going there. Avid Systems at the time cost more than $100,000, and Apple started hosting free seminars in 60 cities across the US. So then a lot of people might still remember Walter Murch, who's like an editing legend, who did a lot of teaching around Final Cut Pro later on, because he edited the movie Cold Mountain, which is a big movie, on an off-the-shelf Power Mac G4, and got an Oscar nomination for that. And that's where the credibility switched, right? That's when people, and when I say Final Cut Pro, I'm talking about the old Final Cut Pro, one, which look completely different from the current one. So by 2007, Final Cut had 49% of the US pro editing market. So within those 7 years, they kind of took over. The Coen brothers cut No Country for Old Men on it and won Best Picture Oscar. And I mean, there's a lot of back-to-back editing Oscars that were, like from people who used Final Cut. And then, of course, in 2011, Final Cut, the original one, was unfortunately discontinued, and Apple introduced Final Cut Pro, which was called X first, Final Cut Pro 10, like the Roman letter 10. And you couldn't open Final Cut Pro 7, the former one, anymore. So point of frustrations for all of us. I mean, we were literally kind of caught, barefooted. No multicam in the beginning, no XML, EDL, AAF export. So you lost a lot of pro functions, and a lot of people working with Final Cut Pro 7 were kind of stranded with their productions midstream. And then there was a petition of 3,700 editors. There was even a parody video by Conan O'Brien for editors calling it iMovie Pro. And then Adobe really rolled into this, and Premiere took over for quite a few years. So that was tough. I think that was a really bad business decision on Apple's part. I keep saying that they should have just released a new editing. I mean, it's true, Final Cut could not have continued the way it was because of their, I think it was 32-bit code base, and they moved to 64-bit. But what they should have done is probably release a new editing software and call it a new name. Don't call it Final Cut Pro. Just have them run in parallel for a few years and try to do a good handover, right? Because they lost literally their market share. I mean, the current market share, Premiere Pro holds around 35%, Final Cut 25%, and DaVinci Resolve 15%. And the Final Cut, for the new Final Cut, I think it became really good over time again, but it took them a long time. And I always liked it, but it never really could replace a more fully featured editing software like Premiere or DaVinci. I mean, now it can, I think, but for the first couple of years, it was really tough. And that was, I think, a huge mistake. I mean, yeah, Another thing which needs to be mentioned with Apple's filmmaking history is, of course, ProRes, which is a bit of a quiet empire for them. This might be Apple's most successful filmmaking contribution. There is no controversy like with Final Cut. There is no backlash. There's just universal adoption. I mean, even the ARRI Alexas have ProRes recording, of course. That was the tipping point. They introduced this in 2010. Apple native files, of course, and hardware encode and decode engines are baked into every Apple Silicon chip now since the M1 Pro. The codec is literally part of the GPU. So that
the rendering is very fast and
that's it's nobody's complaining about ProRes. I mean, we see people complaining about different RAW formats. I think we still have this ProRes RAW and Blackmagic RAW thing for a long time, which you couldn't use ProRes RAW in DaVinci, and that is over too. So it's kind of like you can use even ProRes RAW now in DaVinci. I think it's the most universal format out there, right? For production, and it's something that a lot of people I don't even think realize that it's made by Apple, because you can use it on Windows too. A few things. I mean, do you remember Shake?
Of course.
Yeah. So that was something that they unfortunately discontinued. That was a really powerful visual effects software that Apple acquired, and then unfortunately they killed it. They first slashed the price from $10,000 to $500, so a little bit like what Blackmagic did with DaVinci when they acquired DaVinci Resolve, but then they killed it. It was discontinued in July 29. Time was a little bit telling. The iPhone launched in 2007. I think Apple's attention shifted. I mean, they simply went into consumer at that time. And we've seen this with a lot of other decisions when it comes to, like Mac Pro, discontinuation. I mean, now we've just had the Mac Pro discontinued again, but it's a different time. I don't think people need the Mac Pro anymore because of the Mac Studio. It was a very, very expensive device. But before that, I mean, I'm talking about 10 years ago, the trash can Mac Pro, which was also expensive, which was also discontinued and then not replaced with a new model for a very long time. And then they brought out a new one, which was extremely expensive. So, I mean, I still have the old cheese grater. I mean, the one that existed from 2006 to 2012, which had 4 PCI slots. So you could run a lot of different video cards in there, internal drive base, and everything was user upgradable. Very unusual for Apple. I ran this for, I think, 8 years. I kept upgrading the processor. I was able to buy a new processor for it, right? Then it was discontinued. Then the trash can style Mac Pro it existed for a couple of years, but it throttled over sustained GPU workloads. It was too small. It wasn't able to cool the GPUs properly. Zero internal expansion possible, and it's set unchanged in Apple's store for 2,100 days. It was not upgraded. And then they tried, I call it the redemption tower. The latest Mac Pro, again, like the original cheese grater Mac Pro, had real PCIe slots, and Pro Display is XDR, of course. But now it's discontinued again. But I think the times have changed. I think everybody realizes now that the sheer power of Apple Silicon now it's just powerful enough to run basic. I mean, you can literally buy, I don't know, one of the cheapest Macs now. You can buy a Mac Mini and edit 6K footage with it, which is insane. I mean, you don't have to spend a lot of money on the Mac anymore to have a very powerful machine, which is amazing. I think they are also in terms of hardware lineup, now with the release of the MacBook Neo and so on, they are in a position for the first time where it's just, they're kind of playing on all cylinders, okay. There is not a gap anymore. There doesn't seem to be any, because usually there's always one thing which is outdated, right? Which is not current up to specs anymore. And I looked at the lineup. Everything is very capable for editing video. I saw some reviews of people using the new MacBook Neo to edit video. I mean, yes, it has an iPhone processor, but it's good enough even for easy editing tasks. and we're talking about a $600 computer, which is something where the Windows world doesn't have anything right now. So interesting. And of course, the iPhone also as a cinema camera. I mean, we've seen, of course, that's always a bit of a, can you take it seriously? But the quality now is good enough that, you know, I mean, they're literally shooting all their own content on iPhones now, Apple are. And iPhone 17 Pro, of course, has ProRes RAW built in, Genlock Sync, Apple Lock 2 with ACES support, OpenGate 4x3. We named it one of our cameras of the year in 2025 because of that. The ecosystem is now massive. We have, you know, accessories from Bscript, Moondog Labs, SmallRig, Moment, DJI, Rode, Tilta, Tentacle Sync. It is really a legitimate rig system that can rival mirrorless cameras for a lot of stuff. And the question is just, at what point does the discussion of but it's just a phone argument become irrelevant? Because I think if you look at some of the, and that's the problem, I think a lot of the mirrorless industry is that the phone is now so good that for a lot of purposes you simply don't need a proper dedicated camera anymore. I think that's literally where...
Back to my Easter vacation, I had only the phone, the iPhone with me, and that was more than enough. Honestly.
But even the years before, I mean, you know, like, I mean, there were a lot of course, it was more like experiments. I mean, we had Danny Boyle in 2025. I think he shot 28 days, years later on 20 iPhones. That's a $60 to $75 million studio film. With the Soderbergh movies shot on iPhone and so on. But it's really making inroads. So, and of course, now the most current moves from Apple's side, we talked about the hardware, of course, M5 Pro, M5 Pro, M5 Max, MacBook Pros with a Fusion architecture, extra 18-core CPUs, Thunderbolt 5, basically being able to edit 8K ProRes on a battery is amazing. And now the Apple Creator Studio, there seems to be a ignited interest from them to really get the professional industry with professional tools. I mean, we've just had the Motion VFX acquisition that we talked about, I think, last week, to really add functionality to Final Cut Pro. So I think there is also in their lineup, when you look at the Mac Studio and so on, I think there seems to be, again, a lot of interest in capturing professionals, which wasn't there for a long time. And they kind of neglected professionals for a long time. And that gives me hope that, you know, I mean, Adobe really gets some serious competition now with the Apple Creator Studio lineup because their subscription is simply much more attainable than the Adobe subscription in terms of what you get, very aggressive pricing. So, yeah. And of course, also new Studio Display XDR, which is more affordable than it was before. There are, of course, unresolved questions. How much, you know, like, I mean, in the past, of course, Apple was always criticized for those closed systems. I think they've opened up quite a bit over the years. The question is also about, I love Apple Immersive Video. If you look at it on the Vision Pro, it's amazing, but it's still a niche thing. They've, you know, like, I think sales have not kind of caught up with the expectations. But it's a chicken egg problem, you know. Limited content means limited audience. The content that's out there is amazing, but the audience is small. And given the history of discontinuations over the years with Shake, Aperture, you know, the desktop, the photo editing app, which is kind of like Lightroom, and also the discontinuation of the Trashcan Mac Pro and the original Final Cut Pro. The question is, I think a lot of people are hesitant to trust Apple again enough to build Apple-only workflows. I still remember Red Bull Media House in Austria here that ran everything on a Final Cut Pro 7. They had a huge metadata ecosystem running on Final Cut Pro 7, and then overnight, I mean, it didn't make sense anymore because Final Cut was discontinued. So the question is, will professionals trust them again with this? Yeah.
By the way, where are they gonna fix the gamma shift issue?
We did a long time ago. We did a video on this, right?
Because I'm still what I see on my laptop, and when I export, it's different.
Yeah, I don't know. I have to look at that old video again. I think Graham actually did an interview with somebody who fixed it, kind of found a workflow to fix it that we ran years ago. But
that's one of the things that sometimes the company is running fast forward, but small things like this are being forgotten over time.
Maybe. Well, let's look at it again. Maybe have something to report on this soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's just if you look back at of course 50 years is a long time, but even if you look back 20, 30 years, which is my horizon with Apple products, or actually more like 35 years, it's just amazing how far we've come. I mean, how little money you can spend now to have a proper editing software, like system. Everything.
From a camera to editing. That's...
Yeah, you literally, I mean, you can buy an iPhone and a MacBook, a cheap one, and then just do everything with it.
We talked about this before, but it's all being democratized now. And at the end of the day, it's really up to your talent and up to the storytelling. The equipment is absolutely not a factor anymore.
I'd be very interested to hear from our listeners and viewers on what Apple contribution had the biggest impact on your workflow. Was it the iPhone? Was it Mac Studio? Was it Final Cut? Just let us know in the comments. Also your frustrations, because like, did you switch system because of some of those discontinuations, or did you actually switch back to Mac because of some of them? I'd be very interested in hearing from you guys. So please, send us an email at podcast@cined.com or just comment under the YouTube video. That'd be amazing to hear. All right. That was a long excursion into 50 years of Apple in filmmaking. And now we'll move on to something else. Why camera batteries fail?
I don't have the answer. I'm just a user. But seriously speaking, we know Core SWX. This is a company, American company specialized in doing batteries, among other stuff, but mostly batteries. And the CEO, Ross Kanarek, who is really a great guy. We have a lot of conversations, very interesting conversations with him. He's very knowledgeable. He's literally from within our industry, been working with DPs on set a lot. When he established the company a few years ago, quite a long time ago, he had in mind to do things a little bit better when it comes to powering cameras, light fixtures, and so on. But one thing always stays the same. We look at the battery, at least for many of us, including myself. You look at the battery, and of course, all those new batteries have nice LCD screen and some lights, and telling you for how long the battery will live and so on. But when you look at the other side of the battery, at the back side of it, and you will see some numbers, and it doesn't matter if it's watt hours, voltage, or amps. I think for many of us, it's a bit of a mystery. What does it mean? And how to make the best out of a battery, and not to come to the point that it's literally falling on you in the middle of the production. So Ross, being a very direct person, made a very nice video, very, very simple, very straightforward. There are no pyrotechnics over there. But I really encourage you guys to look at this video once or even twice if needed, just to understand the proper terminology when it comes to batteries. And at least I learned a lot just by watching it. And I think I would love to see more videos like this, very simple, very straightforward, about technology that we're using every day, but not necessarily know how to treat or read the numbers behind the on the label.
So how can I make sure a battery doesn't fail as quickly in terms of charging?
Well, there's
Do I need to drain it every time fully, or?
I don't think that Ross was, when I saw this video, Ross was not referring to this in particular. Although he's promising more videos to come, so we can when we see him next month at NAB, we can ask him to make a video about that specific thing. But it's more about not to be surprised why the battery is suddenly falling on you in the middle of production. If, for example, you either put a weaker battery on something that demand more power, and suddenly, many times when you put a battery on a light and it's not sufficient, it will start flickering or at some point. Or if you use something which is much too strong on a device, it can simply kill it. Yeah. So all in all, the video is just helping you to make a order on the information and how to read those the data and the details on the labeling.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah, so we have this article on the site with the video from Ross and Cord SWX embedded. So check it out. Link in the show notes as usual. And then just a quick mention of our site sponsor CVP, who are our retail sponsor in Europe. We have B&H for the US and rest of the world and CVP for Europe. So if you are purchasing any piece of gear, please consider using the links to CVP on B&H. We get a tiny commission from each sale, which helps us keep the lights on here in the studio and elsewhere at CineD. And we just ran an article on CVP expanding their presence in Germany and Austria and Switzerland, which runs close to our heart because we are headquartered in Austria. And we've told them for many years that they actually need a proper German language website. I mean, of course, there's always been like an auto translation version of that. But you know how it is. If you buy gear, you want to feel like you buy from a local dealer or have somebody to talk to who's local, which always helps, and who speaks your language. Now, in the last few years, they've already made a lot of progress into expanding into the EU. Of course, CVP, being originally from the UK, was kind of, had a problem once Brexit was executed, that now suddenly there were levies and customs that were imposed on their goods when something was shipped from the UK to the EU. The problem
then they
was
solved.
Exactly, because they opened a facility in Belgium. So basically a local subsidiary within the EU. So almost everything that you order from them within the EU now gets actually shipped from Belgium very quickly. But of course, what they were still missing is the largest language market is the German language market in the EU, which is around 100 million people. And now they are hired Marco Müller as CVP sales director. He's a very experienced guy from the industry who has worked in filmmaking for many, many, many years. So it's very nice to see him work and operate the DACH operation, which is Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And it's great that they actually take this seriously. I think it's very important to have somebody who speaks the language and also a local team to deal with everything. So yeah, look forward to talking to them about this once we meet them the next time. All right, let's move on to AutoCut plugin, which now integrates AI directly into Premiere Pro. Is this similar to Eddy AI?
It's a bit different, but first I want to start with the trend. I think we are all so much involved with editing and different type of editings. I mean, it can be documentary, or when we are making a review, obviously we are sitting in front of the camera and we have to talk and share our impression with the audience and so on. So what we see now, more and more tools that actually trying to help you with the tedious work of editing, like organizing the material, and even to the point of selecting the parts which are good within this sea of material. So AutoCut, it's a plug-in. It's a French-developed AI plug-in for Adobe Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve. And they just released the newer version, AutoCut Repeat 2.0. And I think the nice thing about that one, it's maybe made especially for me, because I'm not really great in front of the camera, reading even a teleprompter or whatever I need when I'm doing a review. This thing is literally supposed to pick up the good parts of what you said and then create a timeline with like helping you to select all those good takes. Now, we still have to try it. I mean, I didn't try it yet. I really want to see if that can help in general. But this plugin is literally almost like an AI video editing suite within Premiere and DaVinci Resolve, because it can do quite a lot. It can help you with like if you have some silence within the video, literally to cut it out. It can translate and add captions. It can help you to edit podcast. It can add dynamic zoom. Sometimes, we're using one camera and so on. So all based on the AI. And I think it's worth giving it a try. But as you said, we have Eddie AI who doing some of the stuff. It's different because it's similar but different. It's all about helping us when we edit, and it's not necessarily taking over. Mm-hmm. But we know, there's quite a lot of competition now. We also know that Claude Code has their own plug-in for, I think maybe not only Premiere Pro, but at least for Premiere, to help and edit. So I think we're going to see much more of that AI stuff kind of coming on top of the editing suite, although we know that also Adobe is not resting on their laurels, and they are doing, and I'm sure just before NAB, we're probably going to see even more from Adobe and probably Blackmagic Design, and who knows, maybe also Apple, because AI for editing will simply be part of the whole editing suite.
And sticking with AI, I want to mention our latest update to our ever-evolving ethical AI video generation course by Drew Shirazi. We just added a new lesson, and this might be the most practical one yet, because Drew actually used AI to plan a real photo shoot and then went and shot it. And its side-by-side results are in the real course, and that's really interesting. So what he did is Drew uploaded real photos of his model Michaela into Higgsfield AI, which is an AI video generation platform which offers different models, and that was explained actually in the prior lesson. He generated wardrobe, lighting, environment combinations, showed them to the model before the shoot, and then used those references on set, The cool thing is that this cost pennies per generation. It's sometimes even free if you have an unlimited plan. And those AI images served as mood boards and visual briefs, and they were not deliverables, right? So this matters because this is a use case where this would really shut up both camps, like from the AI is replacing us and the AI is useless crowd, because nobody is replacing the photographer here. He's using it in a way that you would use a sketch or actually a Pinterest board or something like that, except that you have your actual character's likeness in it, right? So I think that's a meaningful upgrade to pre-production communication with models, stylists, wardrobe department, or whatnot, and clients, of course. There's also a photo dump feature that is highlighted, which is Higgsfield can auto-generate a character in various pre-designed scenes. He used this as a first pass to give Michaela a range of options. Then he refined the prompts to actually match the actual location. For example, old brick house, trendy furniture, specific wardrobe. And the platform really nailed the aesthetic without much hand-holding. It was really quite easy. There's also a relighting tool that he demonstrated, which you can adjust the lighting after the fact and export up to 4K, face swapping, in-painting, image upscaling, style presets, multiple AI models and that do this. And I think the relighting tool is very interesting for DPs in order to test lighting setups before you're actually on the clock on set, right? Because you can do this with location photos, which is very useful. So I think these are references, those are not deliverables. In this case, it's another way of ethically using AI in order to actually have a better result when you're on set shooting. And that's the latest lesson that we just added to this ever-evolving course. If you are interested, this course is part of MZed Pro, which you can get starting from $29 a month if you're on the annual plan. And it will continue to evolve. We will add new lessons all the time as those tools evolve. And it's always going to have the ethical moniker. So we always, this is for filmmakers. We're not doing this in order to replace anyone. It should just help you be more efficient and become a better filmmaker. And I think with that, we can close. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you, Johnny.
Thank you, Nino.
Thanks everybody for watching. Stay tuned for the next episode of CineD Focus Check next week. And don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcasting platform, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, don't forget to leave a comment and like on the YouTube video. Also hit the little bell next to the CineD icon in order to get notified about our new uploads. And see you next week. Bye.